After waiting nearly 2 years for the eviction moratorium in New York State to end, some landlords are finally going to be able to evict their tenants. I'm Tony, and this is Real Estate Investing and Landlord News. All right, so good news for landlords in New York State. The eviction moratorium has finally come to an end. Now, it officially ended on January the 15th, and this is great news. However, what they're doing now is they're pushing for new tenant-friendly protections to try to, trying to basically screw over landlords, but they say that they're trying to help tenants with all this. So one of the big things they're coming out with now is the whole good cause eviction thing, where unless you meet certain categories that they define, then you can't evict your tenant. And you can't even let your lease expire and then remove that tenant. You have to renew your lease according to them. And they might even be putting how much you can raise the rent on that tenant into the lease as well. So, basically you've lost control of your property with some of these new laws and rules that they're putting in place as soon as this eviction moratorium ends. Now, before I get into the article, go ahead, hit the like and subscribe button, maybe leave a comment down below, and let me know, are you surprised that the New York State eviction moratorium actually came to an end? I know I am. I just didn't think it was going to happen. I thought for sure they'd be like, oh man, it's wintertime. We can't get rid of these tenants right now. They're going to be out in the cold. Well, they surprised me with it, and we'll see though, with all these new laws and rules that are going to be coming out pretty soon in New York State. Landlords still might not be able to get rid of these bad tenants. So, I visited New York. I was just in New York City last week, and we went out to Manhattan. I'll throw a couple of these pictures up on the screen. Went up to the top of the Empire State Building and went down to Times Square. Had a pretty good time, and, it's a beautiful city. And, I feel bad for all the people who live there and try to be good landlords, and they're just getting screwed over by the state. So, this article, it's coming from the Syracuse.com, and it says, the end of New York's eviction moratorium will bring pain and relief. Why be a landlord? Yeah, and that's a good question. Why be a landlord, at least in New York State? But let's see what the article says. Susan Griffith and William Scott Thomas have both been counting down to January 15th. For Griffith, it is the beginning of a nightmare. For Thomas, it is the end of one. New York's eviction moratorium expires today. Griffith, managing attorney at Legal Services of CNY, spends her days trying to keep people in 13 counties from getting evicted. Many are families with no place to go. Thomas is a small-time landlord who owns 3 Syracuse rental properties. He is currently unemployed, so rents are his only income. Several of his tenants did not pay during the pandemic, he said. He was able to get some rental assistance, but not enough to cover his losses. And this is the perfect description of exactly what was happening to a lot of small landlords. So we have a guy, he owns 3 rental properties. That's his only source of income because, I guess he's unemployed right now. So guess what? He didn't make enough from the rental assistance to actually cover the losses, that he was taking from his tenants not paying. Got completely screwed over. And that's exactly what happened to so many landlords. Big, small, it doesn't really matter. If you're not getting all the money back that you lost because of the eviction moratorium, then you got screwed. Okay? So what is your recourse? Basically, you have to get that tenant out of your property, get one that is paying in there so that you can get back to at least some form of normal. You might never recover any of those funds that, you lost during this whole 2-year time period, but at least you can, going forward, hopefully survive. So, yeah, horrible situation. Now, of course, the lawyer's like, oh, I'm experiencing a nightmare. Well, the lawyer didn't lose their source of income. They didn't have to suddenly support a whole bunch of people off of their paycheck. No, that was the job of the landlord, to suddenly pay for the housing for the low income and the homeless. Give me a break. This lawyer's full of garbage and didn't even probably think of what landlords were going through when all this was happening. The moratorium was either a savior or a punishment, depending on who you ask, but there is no question about what the end of it brings. Tens of thousands of people will get evicted across the state. Some landlords have been waiting almost 2 years to get paid. They are out of patience. In Onondaga County, they will evict and raise rents in a housing market that is already the tightest in history. Landlords and tenant advocates both said. Families who have no place to go will double dip with friends as COVID-19 surges. Area shelters are planning to get slammed, and at least one is already over capacity. Yeah, I mean, if these families are ending up in homeless shelters, well, that's what has to happen, okay? If they have to double up, that's what has to happen. It is not the landlord's responsibility to be the replacement for a homeless shelter. I mean, did they even think about that? They expect the landlord to be a replacement for a homeless shelter or to be low-income housing? No, it is not the landlord's responsibility to do that, okay? The landlord is a for-profit business, not a homeless shelter, not social services, not the government. It is a for-profit business, and it is not their job to provide housing for the poor. Lawyers expect the courts to struggle to absorb the rush in filings. In Syracuse, there are 377 evictions lined up, waiting for today. There are more than 900 in Onondaga County, according to state data. Statewide, there were 67,335 evictions filed last year. Most have been paused because of the moratorium. That number is expected to grow exponentially starting next week. Legal advocates also predict that illegal evictions, already on the rise during the pandemic, will now increase. Well, yeah, there's a backlog, so it could still be that some of these tenants are protected for months, and they need to start making plans to go, okay? They need to, realize that now that this eviction moratorium is over, hey, I've got to move on, so let me figure out what we're going to do if we have to go live with relatives or whatever, or if we have to find somewhere that is lower cost, or if I have to go get a job so that I can actually pay my rent. You have time to do that. It's not like you're going to instantly be evicted now that it's January the 15th, past January the 15th, okay? You have a little bit of time. You might be able to, get something, and you won't end up, homeless on the streets or living in a shelter. But, this thing about, they threw this in here, the legal advocates predict illegal evictions will rise. Well, why would a landlord have waited until the eviction moratorium ended before they did an illegal eviction? They wouldn't have. If there's a bad landlord out there who is doing an illegal eviction, they would have already done it, okay? They wouldn't have waited till after January 15th. That's an idiotic statement, and that kind of tells you where this article is leaning. It's always that these articles, they always lean towards the tenant side, and rarely do they ever think about the consequences of all their actions on landlords. We expect there to be pretty massive filings. How many evictions have been bottled up waiting for this day is unclear. In a normal year in Syracuse, there are 5,000 evictions. In 2019, there were 262,365 evictions across the state. And that number is likely an undercount. We expect there to be pretty massive filings, Griffith said. She doesn't think there's a backlog of 5,000 cases that will be filed all in one day, but she and other advocates said they expect court filings to pile up quickly. Her office has 538 cases in the 13 counties it covers. Many of those cases had been paused because of the moratorium. Syracuse Court is scheduling new eviction cases several weeks out, but town and village courts are starting next week. Yeah, and good for them. Okay, they need to get this ball rolling. The process, as long as it takes, it needs to at least get started. And just the fact that they had put all these evictions on pause for 2 years, that tells you that there's probably people who haven't paid any rent since 2019, okay? And they haven't been evicted yet. So those people, if they're still sitting in these properties or sitting in their unit, then they need to go. They need to figure out what they're going to do ASAP. And the landlords, they need to get their properties back, okay? They need to get tenants in them that are paying. If they weren't able to get any rental assistance, or even if they were able to get some rental assistance, I truly doubt that they are fully, they were fully compensated for all of the losses that they've taken over the last 2 years. Now, this thing is finally coming to an end. And there's not many places left throughout the entire country. I've heard of a few local municipalities where there are still eviction moratoriums going on. I think in Seattle up in Washington still has an eviction moratorium. I think Los Angeles, maybe not, but I know that there's a few places where this stuff is still going on. But fortunately, throughout the country, this is finally over. So yeah, this is good news for landlords. I feel for, especially like these small landlords like the one described in this article, because you lost 100% of your income, and then you're paying, on top of losing all of your income, you're paying to house these people on your dime, and that's completely ridiculous, and that's not how this should have been done.